If you're someone who spends too much time chopping vegetables, or maybe you've had one too many close calls on the cutting board, this video's for you. You'll learn the safest way to grip your knives, the most efficient and effective cutting techniques, and the biggest mistakes to avoid. To teach you all this, I brought in a very special guest, Chef JC White. He has a degree in culinary nutrition, and over the past decade, he's worked at high-end restaurants, 5-star hotels, and he's been a private chef for NBA and NFL stars. He's not only gonna teach you the fundamentals of knife skills, but he's gonna show you some pro tips on how to cut the most common ingredients in your kitchen.
You can't start doing anything with a knife without a good stable base. You have two options. One, you can square up really nicely on the cutting board and have a nice square stance when you have your hands at an angle with the food, or stepping back with your knife side foot and allowing your arm to have squared access to the board. Along with that, you never want to have a slippery cutting board. Make sure you have something under your board to keep it from rocking. A wet towel is just as good as anything else. And I line my cutting board up to the edge of the counter, and I tend to have a little overhang. That way I can scrape across and put the lip of my bowl right under the cutting board. Now let's talk about the grip. The pinch grip is when you take your pointer finger and your thumb and you pinch directly onto the blade. Then you wrap those fingers right around the rear end and keep it tight to your palm. This gives you ultimate control. It allows you to have no movement sideways if you're cutting anything hard or wet. And it also gives you a lot less tension on your upper forearm. One of the more common issues that we run into in the kitchen is when people want to put their finger on the spine of the blade. This may feel comfortable to you at first. However, you lose a lot of control and it tends to put a lot more strain on your wrist when you're cutting. Another common mistake that I see is when people don't know what to do with their other hand. They put it in harm's way by opening it up and allowing the knife to go towards your fingers. The big thing we want to focus on is working with a claw. The claw allows you to have a nice bend in the first set of knuckles, right down the ridge, and therefore you can spring into it like it's a set of knees. By pressing into that, you're opening up the ability to have a triangle between the board, your first knuckle, and the blade. By giving yourself this safety buffer, it keeps your fingertip out of harm's way. You want to curl into it and allow those knuckles to press into the food and control what you're cutting. Then resting the knife on that first knuckle is what we're going to work with. This allows you to slice through whatever you're working with and work your way down the food rather than bringing the food to the knife. None of the fingers should open up. You should never have your fingernail in harm's way when you're slicing. We want to make sure that we have full control of the food and we're working down it all the way to the end. And when you get to the end, you can feel your thumb in the back press against the fingertips, and that's when you know you're at the final slice. Now that we've talked about how to hold the knife, how to work with our claw, let's talk about actual knife motion. You have two real options. One is a more diagonal straight line. It's when you're going to be holding your food with the claw and you want to work in a push forward diagonal motion. Anytime we're cutting, we want to make sure the tip of our knife is moving forward and back about 1 inch to 3 inches, depending on what you're cutting. That way, you're allowing the knife to cut the food, not to pop through it or punch through it. The other option that we have is a round motion. It allows you to work in a circular motion, and that way it's continuous throughout your cutting process. The round motion allows you to keep that contact with the board, which is a lot more comforting to some people. Now that we've talked about knife safety, let's take a look at actual knife cuts. When we're working with food, we want to first off make sure it's not bigger than our knife. That's creating an unsafe setting. So a lot of times when it's something like a zucchini or a carrot, I'll cut not only the top and the bottom off, but I'll also cut straight in the center. This gives you a little bit more of a manageable piece of produce to work with. As you know, zucchini rolls, and if it's rolling, you don't want to be chasing it with a knife. So the first step that I always take is I make sure to make a foot. That is simply by rolling your food back into your thumb and creating a flat side. By doing this, zucchini won't roll on you and you can actually cut a lot more clean lined with it. From there, we want to start making planks. Planks are the first initial cut. They're all lateral with the actual food, and that's what we're going to work with as we work down the cuts. So again, we put our thumb to the backside and make our claw on the top, put your knife on your knuckle, and we're going to cut cleanly through the food. Notice my knife move forward through that cut. From here, we're going to pull our knife out, and we're going to continue that same exact cutting motion as we do it, trying to maintain the equal size planks. And when you get to the end here, where you're a little close to your fingers, simply pinch the actual already cut food, and that gives you a little bit more of a bridge cut, okay? Bridge grips allow you to have the knife between your fingers in a safe way. From here, we're gonna make batons. Batons are where you take your flat cuts and you create the same exact width, but you're gonna create sticks. So again, thumbs on the back, fingers on top, and we're gonna cut straight down through it. Continuing down the food, and now we have our beautiful batons, all pretty squared up, and we're looking great. Once you get your batons, the easiest part is to make your dice. So work with what you're comfortable with. Don't try and have a huge stack and try and finagle your way around it. Sometimes it's easier just to have 3 or 4 batons, and that's a good way to start. So again, thumbs on the back, fingers on, knuckles there, and creating that same stroke. Moving our knife forward and continuing down the food. And that is gonna be your diced zucchini. Onions are a weird shape, so we always wanna focus on 2 big things. One, the top. That's the rat tail. The haircut we should have never had in the 90s. The bottom is the root with the little stringy stuff. So what we wanna do first is we wanna cut off the rat tail. Now, we can use that as our foot, as we spoke about before, and cut straight down through the root. Make sure you've got a good hand on it and do your bridge cut again. Let's peel it up, get all that dry skin off. Nobody wants to have that dry, bitter, crunchy stuff in your food. Now that we have our onions peeled, we can do one of 2 things. You have the choice to make a very square, pretty consistent cut, or you can work with a little bit more of an easy dice, and that's working with a radial motion. Let's talk about the square cut first. So we're gonna take our knife and cut horizontally across, your hand flat on top, not pressing too hard, because when you put too much pressure on it, you're actually making it harder for the knife to go through it. But making sure that we have control of the onion is important. I'll pull it to the back of my cutting board to allow my knuckles to be off the side. That helps with a little bit of the consistent angle. As we're here, we're gonna go slicing into it, gently rocking our knife, but making sure we never go through the back. That is what we're holding on to, and that's what keeps our onion very tight and easy for us to slice without it falling apart and frilling out. Once you've done that once, you can come back for a second time and do the same. Again, stopping just before the back. And now we're gonna turn our onion and we're gonna put our knife straight to the back end of it and go indirect and pull out. By having that root still attached, it keeps it all together for us. So we're gonna do that all the way across the top. And now we have all of our vertical cuts. You turn it sideways and you go straight across. That is a relatively consistent diced onion. From there, we can take on our second option. Sometimes we're not gonna need anything perfect with our dice. And honestly, when you're making soups or sauces, a lot of the times you just wanna get it in the pan. You don't wanna deal with the extra cuts and the extra angles. And we wanna be efficient with our time. So rather than coming in with our flat cut first, we start on an angle. You create a rainbow cut. This is where you're doing the same thing you did, but rather than going across and going straight down after, we're gonna start with a slight angle to our knife. This allows you to have a direct line through all those layers, and you're still just going to the back and pulling. And as you get to the center, notice my knife is now straight up and down. That's gonna give us that straight cut. So working from a roughly 45-degree angle up to a 90-degree angle. As we get to the back side, we're gonna do the same thing and start arcing back. And if you're uncomfortable with this, this is where we go to a bridge grip. Again, watching where the tip of our knife goes into the onion is gonna keep us from going through the back. And now we're all still together. This is where we turn it again and go straight down it. And this is also a consistent dice. However, it's a little bit less squared up, which in most settings is okay. When you get to the end, if you need to, you can always slice down the top a little and get that extra little bit. But that is a radial dice. When you look at a pepper, it's got a lot of different shapes to it. So it's kind of hard to figure out where and how to cut it. One option is a fajita cut. And that's where you take your pepper, stand it up straight, go bridge grip, and slice straight through that stem to the bottom. This opens it up and it gives you all the insides at your axis. So you can just dive in there with your claw, rip out the guts, and you end up with a pretty reasonable C shape to it. This is where we can take and do a fajita cut or a stir fry cut and make sure your claw is still happening, thumbs on the backside, and we're just gonna do nice clean slices down it. The consistency isn't what we're hoping for other fine plate ups. However, it's still a great use for a charcuterie board or for just tossing in a stir fry. The other way we can do it is to try and make our pepper squarer. When you look at the top, you've got a ridge here. You want to line your knife up to cut straight through that ridge, therefore giving you some holes to see straight through to the bottom. So I'll slice one very thin slice off, and you've got some holes. Then you flip it over, do the same thing on the back side, and now I can see through. You take your knife and you connect those holes, slip your blade in, come to the edge, and you're gonna plane and roll your pepper through those ribs. This gives you your full seed bed and your stem with a large flat and some diceable pieces. From here, you can make nice planks, or nice batons as we did before, just keeping the pressure into the pepper so it doesn't coil up on you. And if you really want to, and you're gonna be grilling, it's a really nice thing to make planks so that you can just have a nice flat piece of pepper with some nice grill marks on it. First and foremost, I like to chop the crown off and the bottom off. This gives you a nice flat surface and it's not gonna move around on you too much. From here, we're going to literally plane the outer spines off. So when we're holding our knife, this is one of few times that I actually will allow my fingertip to go to the spine and I'll turn my knife slightly in my hand. That gives me a little bit better of an angle to work around a round produce. So we're going to start by going in, and the first stroke isn't always perfect. This is your research stroke. You wanna go down and find out how deep those spines go. I personally wanna go a little deeper than that. So I'm gonna take my next stripe and I'm gonna go a little bit deeper. And now I notice that I've got a nice clean spineless spot. So I'll use that as my gauge and work my way around as I'm going. Now that our pineapple's all cleaned up, this is where we're gonna say, how do we get the centerpiece out? So I'll take my knife and set it right in the center of it and go straight down again with the bridge grip, straight to the bottom, therefore opening it up and letting me see it. You have two options. One's not very fun or safe, and that's you taking your knife at an angle and trying to slice it out. I don't really prefer that because it really does end up making the pineapple weaker too, so any slices you do get out are most likely to break. So normally I'll lay it flat and do the same exact thing, cut it straight in half. And from here, you're just working on a slight 45-degree angle. Cut that stalk out. And from that, all you do is make your decision. You can have slices. You can have dicing by simply going vertical. Or if you want to get crazy, you can do long stalks. These are also great for grilling if you want to have a little grilled pineapple salsa.
A huge thank you to JC for sharing his expertise with us. And if this video was helpful, check out this video where I break down which kitchen knives are essential and which ones are nice to have. And for more videos like this, click the logo to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.